Yes, sir. We'll start then. So if you remember in the previous session, we were discussing about NVIC, Nested Vectored Interrupt Controller. Okay, and what are all the features it supported? Nested interrupt support, vectored interrupt support, dynamic priority changes, reduction of interrupt latency, and interrupt masking. Okay, so those who are not attended the previous session, so I have shared the YouTube link into your group. So go through that video so that you will understand what we discussed in the previous session. So now the next topic we'll discuss is vector tables. So in NVIC, the second feature it supported was vectored interrupts. Okay, so vectored interrupts in the sense, see whenever an interrupt takes place, okay, so if you remember the sequence, whenever an interrupt takes place, the next thing that will take place is the corresponding ISR should start executing. Okay, so let's say interrupt has taken place, so INT1, INT1, so this will be intimated to the microprocessor, okay, microprocessor or microcontroller. So in our case, it is ARM Cortex M3. Whenever this is intimated to the processor, so processor, what it will do is, it will watch the operation, okay, so it will watch the operation, whatever it is currently doing, and it has to immediately start executing, the interrupt service routine for that particular interrupt. So in this case, it is interrupt 1, so ISR 1. Okay, so what will be there in ISR? See, whenever this interrupt takes place, so what should happen? So if it is a, let's say, a key press, so whenever a key press takes place, let's say an LED should turn on. Okay, so to turn on the LED, whatever the code is required, so that will be written in the interrupt service routine. Okay, so this is for interrupt 1. So like that, if there are more than one interrupts, so interrupt 2, so there will be a ISR 2 for that. Okay, there will be an ISR 2. So if there are n interrupt, there will be n ISRs. Okay. So now we already know that Cortex M3 supports maximum 256 interrupts and exceptions. Okay. So out of 256, 240 external interrupts it will support, and 16 internal interrupts, which is nothing but exceptions, it will support. Okay. So whenever an interrupt takes place, the processor has to pause its operation and it has to start executing the interrupt service routine for that interrupt. Okay. So to start executing the interrupt service routine for that interrupt, first it has to locate where, or it has to locate the memory location from which this interrupt service routine for that corresponding interrupt is placed. So where is this placed in the memory? So where is it placed in the memory means, what is the address of the memory location from which this ISR, that is the code that needs to be executed whenever that interrupt has taken place, is located in the memory. So it has to come to know the address. Okay. So how it will come to know the address? So there are two ways. One is software enabled and one more is hardware enabled. So you can write one more code, okay, which will find out this address. Okay, so address of that ISR and where it is located, and then based on that, the processor will jump to that address location and it will start the execution from that. Okay, so that can be done in software. So usually, whatever it is done in software, it will take more time compared to a hardware, dedicated hardware. If there is a dedicated hardware, then the same job can be done more efficiently. So in Cortex M3, for locating the addresses of the interrupt service routines, there is a hardware known as NVIC, and it supports a memory table known as vector table. Okay, so there is a memory table known as vector table, which will be constructed by the NVIC. Okay, so according to the name itself, as it indicates, it is a table of memory which contains the starting addresses of all the interrupt service routines that are supported by the microcontroller. Okay, so this vector table will hold the starting address of ISR1. Okay, it will also hold the starting address of ISR2, like that. Okay, now where is this vector table located? Okay, so where is this vector table located? Fine, and since this table contains the starting addresses of each ISRs, okay, each ISRs, okay. So in this table, where is the starting address of ISR 1 and where is the starting address of ISR 2? So there are various locations here. You can see the location. So if I number the locations like this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just an example. So there are 5 locations in this vector table, and as we know, vector table will contain the starting addresses of all the ISRs. Okay. Now I need to come to know where is the starting address of ISR 1. Okay. So whether it is located in location 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. So where is the starting address of ISR 1 located? In which location? How to come to know that? So that is what we will discuss here. So vector table, when an exception event takes place in Cortex M3 and is accepted by the processor core, the corresponding exception handler is executed. That is the ISR. Okay. To determine the starting address of the exception handler, which is nothing but the ISR. So as I told you, have to first locate where the interrupt service routine is present. Okay. So to locate that, a vector table mechanism is used, which is known as a vector table. So what is this vector table? It's an array of word data. Okay, it's an array of word data inside the system memory. So this table is located in the system memory only, and it is an array of word data. See here, if you remember, in the introduction class, I had told. So a word means 16 bytes. Okay, so word means 16 bytes. That is what we had discussed, right? 16 bytes. And please bear with me, so I don't have any writing tool. Okay, so word means word. Okay, so a byte means 16 bits. 16 bits. Okay, word means 16 bits. Byte means 8 bits. Okay, and I told this representation will change depending on the processor. Okay, so now in this Cortex M3 processor, a word means, so since it is a 32-bit processor, a word here means it is 32-bit here. 32 bits. Okay, a word means 32 bits in terms of Cortex M3. So a vector table is an array of word data. So it is an array of word data. So example, see, I have taken an array here. Okay, so this is an array. So wherein there are various locations, and this is an array of word data means that means here word is 32 bits. So each table here will contain, or sorry, each you can say entry will be 32 bits. Each entry will be of 32 bits. So it's an array of 32 bits data. Okay, inside the system memory only. So it is there in the system memory only. Each representing starting addresses of one exception type. Okay, so each will represent the starting address of one exception type means the ISR. Okay, so for each ISR there will be a entry in this table. Okay, for every ISR there is an entry in this table, and what will be there in this entry? So nothing but the starting address of the ISR. Okay, that will be there. So the vector table is relocatable, and the relocation is controlled by relocation register in NVIC. So you don't worry about this for time being. See, relocation means since this vector table is located in the system memory only, so you can place this vector table in various locations. You can move it around. Okay, you can move it around. So that can be done using a relocation register. Okay, relocation register. So just for timing, remember, it can be relocated to various other addresses. Okay. So after reset, this relocation control register is 0. That means the vector table located in the address 00 after reset. So this is the default value. So that is what we will consider. So after you reset the controller, initially the vector table starts from the location 0x0. Okay, 0x0. So that means, so after, if you consider after reset, so the first location will be here 0x 0 0 0 0. So it is actually 32 bits 32 bits. So I have just taken 4 zeros. Okay, that's all. Totally 8 zeros should be there for 32 bits because it is in hexadecimal representation. Okay, so just for timing, or I'll write the remaining 4 zeros also. So this is the starting address of the vector table. Okay, vector table. Okay, so what will be the next entry or next location? So it is 0x. It is 4 zeros. Okay, followed by 0, 0, 0, 1. Next location. Okay, so obviously plus 1. That's all. Okay, so this location will be 0x. Okay, so 0, 0, 4 zeros. Then 0, 0, 0, 2. Okay, so this location will be 0x 4 zeros because it is 32-bit address. Remember, and to represent 32-bit address, we require 8 zeros. Okay, because it is hexadecimal. Then 0, 0, 0, 3. Okay, then next location will be 0x. So again 4 zeros. 0, 0, 0, 4. So like this, it will continue. So this will be 5. The next location is 6. So next location is 7. Okay, next location is 8. Like that. Okay. So this will continue. So this is the default address where the vector table is located from the address 8 zeros. That means the all zeros. So 32-bit address. So this is the default location of vector table after reset. So now we should come to know. So there are various locations in this table. It is an array, right? So we should come to know in which address is the starting address of ISR1 located. So in which location? So whether it is in location 1, whether it is location 2, or whether it is in location 3. So in which address is the starting address of ISR1 located, or ISR2 located, or ISR10 located? So how to come to know that? So there is a formula for that. See, so if you want to find out the ISR for reset exception, okay, ISR for reset exception. So if it is reset exception, so we should come to know what is the number, exception number for reset. So what is the exception number for reset? It is 1. Okay, exception number for reset is 1. Exception number is very important. So we are trying to find out where is the ISR located, which is for reset. Okay, which is the starting address of the ISR for reset. So for that, first you have to come to know what is the exception number of that exception type. So exception type is reset. So number is 1. So remember, this is the number 1. Now take this number and you have to multiply that number with 4. Okay, so type 1, you have to multiply the exception type, okay, into 4. You have to multiply it into 4. Okay. So why it is into 4? Why it is into 4? So that is important now. So it is into 4 because, as I told, it is an array of word data. Okay, array of word data. That means, so, and we know that each location can store only 8 bits. So 8 bits here. Okay, so 8 bits here, 8 bits here, and 8 bits here. Okay, so totally 32 bits. So since it is 32-bit processor, the addresses in Cortex M3 are also 32 bits. So if you want to locate any address in the memory of ARM Cortex M3, so you have to specify a 32-bit value. Okay, so the address will be of 32-bit. So now to locate the starting address of, let's say, ISR1, okay, ISR1, so its starting address will be a 32-bit value. Its starting address will be a 32-bit value. So to store 32 bits, how many locations we require? Because each location can store only 8 bits. Okay, so to store 32 bits, we require 4 locations. Okay, so 8 bits, 8 bits, 8 bits, 8 bits. So 4 locations. So that is why it is into 4. Okay, so you have to take the exception type, multiply that with 4. So whatever the value you get, that is in that location, you will get the starting address of the ISR for this exception type. Okay, so in this example, it is exception type 1. So exception type 1 is reset. So type 1 multiply it by 4. So what is the value you will get? So it is a 32-bit value because it is 32-bit address. Okay, it is 0. Yes, I'll write it here. So it is 1 into 4. Okay, so which will be equal to, it is 0 followed by 4 zeros because it is a 32-bit address. Please bear with me, I don't have any writing tool. So it is 1 into 4, let's say 1 into 4. So what is 1? It is the exception type. Okay, into 4 means, so 0x, it is a 4-digit number. So 0, 0, 4 zeros. After that, 0, 0, 0, 4. Because 1 into 4 is 4. So that means, what is the meaning of that is, so the ISR for exception type 1, this is exception type 1. Okay, so what is exception type 1? Reset actually. So we know that using the table. So where is that table? So we know the exception table here. Okay, so for reset, the exception number is 1. So type 1 exception means it is reset. Okay, the exception type is 1. Okay, the exception type is 1, which is nothing but reset. So into 4, so this is the value. So in this location of the vector table, you will have the starting address for the ISR, okay, of reset interrupt. Okay, you will get the starting address of the ISR that should be executed whenever reset interrupt takes place. Okay, so where is this location? So it is in the vector table. So we shall identify that location. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so in this location, so we found that there is a starting address for the interrupt service routine for the exception type 1, which is reset. Okay, so how many bits will be stored in this location? So obviously 8 bits only. Okay, but we require 32-bit value. So because as I told, it's a 32-bit address. That means from this location, that is from location 0004, you have to take 4 locations. Okay, you have to take 4 locations. So until this, so first 8 bits will be in 4, next 8 bits will be in 5, next 8 bits will be in 6, and next 8 bit will be in 7. So combining these 4 locations, you will get the address of the ISR for reset. That's all. Okay, so the address of the reset ISR will be available in the location starting at 0004. So how you arrive at 4? You have to multiply the exception type into 4 because it's a 32-bit address and each location can store only 8 bits. So totally 4 locations are required for storing 32 bits. So it is multiplied by 4. So whatever the value you will get, that is the starting address. So sorry, that is the location in the vector table where you can find the starting address of the ISR for that exception type. Okay, fine. So we'll go for, let's say, example. I want to find out the ISR for NMI. So where is the or what is the starting address for the ISR for the interrupt NMI? So for that you have to first take the exception number. For NMI, what is the exception number? 2. Okay. So then what you have to do? You have to multiply 2 into 4 again. So whatever the exception number, sorry, exception type, you have to multiply that with 4. So you will get 8. So what is that 8? Again, it is a 32-bit value. So 4 zeros. Okay, followed by 3 zeros and then 8. So totally it is a 32-bit value. So that means you have to in this location, that is 0x00000008, in this location of the vector table, okay, you will find the starting address of the ISR for NMI, non-maskable interrupt. So where is that? Here. So this is 8. Okay, this is the location 8. So this in this location, so how many bits will be there? Only 8 bits will be there. But I want a 32-bit address. So starting from 8, you have to take 4 locations. Okay, so starting from 8, so from here you have to take 4 locations until here. So this will be 9, and this is A. Okay, you see, so because it is hexadecimal. So instead of 10, it is A, and this is B. So in the locations 8, 9, A, B, if you combine all this, you will get a 32-bit address. Okay, 32-bit address. Okay, which is the starting address of the ISR for non-maskable interrupt, NMI. Okay, so this is how you locate the starting address. This is the vector table. So it is very easy. So you can directly go to that location and get the ISR address. So that is why it is fast. This is what is vector table. So now you can see the starting addresses. Okay, so start with exception type 1. So what is that? Reset. So for reset, so see reset. So for reset, so which is the location you have to access in the vector table? 04. Okay, so that is what I have shown here. You have to access the location 04. So from location 04, you have to go to up to location 7. Okay, then only you will get totally 32 bits. Okay, the next exception is 2. So what is exception 2? It is NMI, non-maskable interrupt. So where is the starting the address for the ISR for NMI? You have to access location 8 in the vector table. So access location 8. So again, from 8 you have to access 4 locations so that you will get all the 32 bits of the ISR, address of the ISR. Okay, so like that. So next, for exception 3, it is 3 into 4. Okay, 3 into 4, 12. So 12 means it is C. Okay, remember it is hexadecimal, 12 means C. So exception 3 is for hard fault. Next, 4, exception type is 4. So 4 into 4 is 16. That means 10. It is in hexadecimal, 10. So it is the memory management fault. So if you go to the vector, table and go to this address in the vector table, so from in this address you will get the ISR for for all the for the interrupt, which the interrupt is memory management fault. Okay, so like that. So this is the vector table. So you can see for all the exception types, you can construct the vector table. Okay. So next is memory map. So as I told, this Cortex M3 is a 32-bit processor. So it has 32-bit data line and 32-bit address line. It has 32-bit address line. Okay, 32 bits. So 32 bits means, so how many, what is the addressing capacity of this Cortex M3 is? It means it is 2 power 32. Okay. Since it has, since the processor has 32-bit address lines, so the addressing capacity for ARM Cortex M3 is, it is 2 power 32. So in the first introduction class, I had told, so what do you mean by data bus and address bus? Okay. So address lines, so how many address lines are there? Depending on that, you can decide how much memory it can access. Okay, how much memory a processor can access. Since Cortex M3 has 32 lines, 32 address lines, so it can access up to 2 power 32 memory locations, which is nothing but, you can split this into 2 power 2 into 2 power 30. Okay, same thing I've split it like this. So next 2 power 2 is 4. Okay, and 2 power 30 is 1 GB. Okay, so again in the introduction class I had told this. It is 1 GB. So totally it is 4 GB. So total memory that Cortex M3 can address is 4 GBs. 4 GB of memory. Okay, so out of that 4 GB, it is again classified into various regions. Okay, we shall see that. So overall 4 GB memory space can be divided into ranges. Okay, as shown in the diagram. So I'll show the diagram. So Cortex M3 design has an internal bus infrastructure optimized for this memory usage. That is, so we saw in the core of the the Cortex M3, wherein there were various buses, okay, which can make use of this memory. Okay, you can see here. So this is the diagram for memory map of the Cortex M3. So you can see the entire 4 GB is split into how many regions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Totally 6 regions. The first region is known as code. Next is SRAM. Next region is peripherals. Next region is external RAM. Next region is external device. And the last region is system level. Totally 6 divisions is done in the total memory. And you can see, as I told, the address is of 32 bits. You can see here it is 8-digit value. 0000. It's a 8-digit value. And then followed by again 4 zeros. Totally 32 bits. You can see the address is starting from 8 zeros and it is going up to 8 Fs. So totally, how many locations? So it can address up to 4 GB of memory. 4 GB. The system level memory region contains interrupt controller and debugging components. So these devices have fixed address. So by having fixed address, so these peripherals, you can port application between Cortex-M3 products easily. That is here system level. See, this system level is very important because this in this only we will have all the configuration registers. If you remember the access levels, okay, the access levels, privileged and user access levels. In user access level, you cannot access the system control space. That is what I told. SCS. Okay, I told that you cannot access SCS, system control space. So what is system control space? Nothing but this system level. This is what system level. Okay, you cannot access system level in user level access. So everything will be here. Okay, and every important component of Cortex-M3, the configuration registers, everything will be here. Okay, and these have fixed addresses. That is, this region is fixed. Okay, from here to here it is fixed. That means in any Cortex family processors, so this address range is fixed only for system level. Okay, it is always fixed for system level. So even though you change the device from Cortex-M3 to Cortex-M2, let's say, or Cortex-M1, but even though you change the device, this address space will be same. So hence what will happen is, so the code that you have written for Cortex-M3 can also be used for M2 or can also be used for M1. Why? Because whenever you want to access the system control space, the code that you have written, the memory addresses that you have written will be the same because this region is same for all the devices of Cortex families. Okay. This is the memory map. Okay, so and you can see the description is also given. So what is the use of external RAM? Okay, what is the use of peripherals? What is the use of SRAM? Okay, so just go through it and you have to remember this range. Okay, so this is asked. Give the write in brief the memory map of Cortex-M3 is asked. So you have to remember this. Okay, so next comes the bus interface. So in memory map, next thing is bus interface. So the bus interface, the data, the main bus interfaces are code bus, system bus, and private peripheral bus. So there are 3 buses. Okay, 3 buses: code bus, system bus, and peripheral bus. So code bus first. These code memory bus again is subdivided into which is physically divided into I code and D code. Okay, so one is for, as the name itself indicates here, I code means instruction code, D code means data code. So to fetch the instruction, this bus will be used. Okay, and to fetch the data for the instruction, this bus will be used. So simultaneously, instruction and data are fetched. Okay, so code bus is split into 2. Okay, I code bus and D code bus. So I code for instruction, D code for data. Okay. So these are optimized for instruction fetches for best execution speed. So next we'll come to system bus. So what is the use of system bus? System bus is used to access memory and peripherals. Okay, it is used to access memory and peripherals. This provides access to SRAM, peripherals, external RAM, external devices, and a part of system level. Okay. So what is the use of code bus? See, code bus, it will access the code region of the memory. This region it will access, code bus. Okay. Next, system bus, it will access SRAM, peripherals, external RAM, external devices and a part of system level. So let's say this much. Out of this much, it will access this much, a part of system level. So that this can be fetched using system bus. Okay. So next, the private peripheral bus, it provides the access for system level memory dedicated for private peripherals like debugging components. So remaining part of the memory is accessed by peripheral bus. It is accessed by peripheral bus. Okay. So now we can see for accessing different memory regions of the Cortex M3, there are different buses. What this will do is, since there are dedicated buses for that, for each, so the access can be done in a faster rate, at a faster rate. Okay, that is why there are 3 separate buses. Okay. So next we will talk about memory protection unit. So the MPU. So what is the use of MPU? See, MPU provides an additional security for protecting certain memory regions. Okay, for protecting certain memory regions. For example, if you remember, in privileged access level, I had told, so the program which is having privileged access level can access all the contents of the memory. So it can access every content of the memory. So it can access every content here. So in this memory map, okay. But there may be certain application wherein, even though it is in privileged access, you might decide that this part of the memory should not be accessed by a program which is in privileged access. Okay, so this part of memory, it should not be given access even to a program which is in privileged access. So in that case, you use a MPU, memory protection unit. Okay, so even though the program has privileged level access, the MPU can still restrict the access to a particular memory region. Okay, so that is why MPU is used. So this unit allows access rules to be set up for privileged access and user program access. When an access rule is violated, the fault exception is generated. So we know the fault exception, right? So what is the exception type number for fault exception? Just consult this table. So fault exceptions here. So it can be hard fault, memory management fault. So you can see memory management fault. So this will take place if a location which should not be accessed by a program is accessed. So that exception will take place. Okay, and fault exception handler will be able to analyze what is the problem and correct it. Okay, so MPU can be used in various ways. So MPU can be used to protect data by the OS kernel. Okay, from the untrusted programs. So because there are various programs that the user downloads and installs on his particular system. So example, so you download some third-party applications from the internet, okay, directly to your mobile device, and you try to install it. Okay, so if it is a virus, then it can gain access to entire memory of your mobile, and it can corrupt your mobile. So to avoid that, so there will be a hardware known as MPU. So it will take care of that. So even though that program tries to access that, so it will not be given access to that. Okay, it is additional security. That is what MPU will do. So next thing we'll discuss is instruction set. So Cortex M3, as we know, it supports only thumb 2 instruction, which is a superset of thumb instruction set. So thumb 2 instruction set consists of 32-bit instructions as well as 16-bit instructions. Okay, and there is only one operation mode, which is thumb mode. Okay, so this will give us high code density and high efficiency. Fine. So in previous ARM processor, so the CPU had 2 operation states. So one was 32-bit ARM state and thumb state. So this I had explained. Prior to Cortex M3, so the other ARM processors, they had 2 operation states, the ARM and thumb. And whenever the requirement for a higher processing came, so it switched to ARM state. And whenever no such requirement was there, it switched to thumb state. Okay, so this was there prior to ARM Cortex M3, but this consumed some time. Okay, so there was time required for switching between ARM and thumb state. Sorry, ARM and thumb state. So to avoid that switching and to save time, So there was only one mode that was introduced in Cortex M3, that was thumb mode, in which both computationally intensive as well as computationally mild processes can be executed in the same mode. Okay, that is what is explained here. Okay, so what is the advantage of having only one state? Okay, so that is the advantage of thumb 2 technologies. No state switching overhead. Okay, saving both execution time and instruction space. Next, no need to separate ARM code and thumb code. Okay, both can be written in same because there is only one state, thumb state, and there is only one instruction set, which is thumb 2. Okay, and next it is easier for efficiency and performance. Okay, in turn making it easier to write the software. Okay, because there is no worry about considering the state switching. Okay, because there is no state switching at all. So this is the example of ARM7 where there was state switching. So ARM7 was, you can see it is a successor of ARM7 is a predecessor of ARM Cortex M3. Okay, so before ARM Cortex M3 came, ARM7 was there. In that you can see there is a state switching that is happening. So main program, so it is in thumb state. So whenever some instructions, computationally intensive instructions came, it immediately changed to ARM state. So you can see timing critical code, okay, computationally intensive. So to change the state from thumb to ARM, you can see this much amount of time is wasted. Okay, so this much amount of time is wasted just to change the state. Okay, same thing is happening here. So once this computationally intensive work is done, so to change back to thumb state, again this much amount of time is wasted. Okay, so this is what is happening in ARM7 device, that is prior to Cortex M3. So to avoid this, so the designers came up with only one state, which is the thumb state. Okay. This is about the instruction set. So since Cortex M3 supports only thumb 2 instruction set, existing program code for ARM needs to be ported to new architecture. So it can be easily ported to other architectures, other device. Next, coming to debugging support. So if you remember the diagram in the core of the Cortex M3, so ARM develops the core as well as the debugging support. So I told this debugging is used to check inside the processor. So what is going wrong or what is going right? Okay, it is just like a microscope into the microprocessor, into the core of the microprocessor. So using this microscope, you can see individual contents of the registers, okay, of the memory, okay, of the intermediate results. So what is happening? So what is going wrong? If something is going wrong, so then you can go and correct it. Okay, so for that you require debugging support. So some of the debugging supports it provides is, see, it provides a JTAG interface. Cortex M3 provides a JTAG interface, which stands for Joint Test Action Group. Okay, so this will give you inside access of the Cortex M3 processor. And for bus interface, it has a DAP, debug access port, so that you can access the bus of the Cortex M3, and you can check the contents of the bus. So what is the present content of the data bus? What is the present content of the address bus? Like that. Okay. So like that. So there is a debug port, JTAG debug port. Okay. So these are the ports. See, it is just like a USB port, okay, or a LAN port. So there is a dedicated port for connecting these buses. So once you connect these buses to the that are available onto the Cortex M3, so you can connect the other end to your laptops or PCs, and you can see what is happening in the Cortex M3 processor. Okay, so these are what is the ports. Okay, so like another debugging feature is embedded trace macro cell, so which is introduced by chip manufacturers. So this is not introduced by ARM, but it is used by chip manufacturers according to their design. Because along with ARM, so they have to also check the peripherals connected. Okay, the external memory connected, the external I/O devices connected. So how will you debug those? Using this embedded trace macro cell. Okay, so like this. So and another function is the data watch point function is provided by data watch point and trace unit. in Cortex M3. So this can be used to stop the processor or generate data trace information. Okay. So to stop the processor means it is nothing but pause the processor. Okay. So let's say, for example, let's say there are 10 instructions, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like this. So you want to stop the execution of the processor whenever it comes to this instruction. At this particular instruction, whenever the processor comes, you want to pause the instruction execution. So that can be done, okay, using this particular example. So this particular debugging technique, data watch point and trace, DWT. So you can place that tracker here to this instruction. So whenever the execution starts from this instruction and it goes down one after the other, whenever the execution reaches this instruction, it will pause the execution of the processor so that you can get the values whatever happened after executing all these upper instructions. Okay, so whatever the intermediate results, so until this particular instruction, you can check that here. Okay, because you have passed the operation to this particular point. Right? This is what is debug interface. The next thing is stack memory operations. See, this we already discussed. Okay, so there are two stacks, and to access the stack, we use push and pop. Okay, and to select the main stack pointer and the process stack pointer, we use the control register. We use the control register. Okay, so we already talked about it. So again, same thing is explained here. So push operation to store the data, okay, saved into the stack memory, and pop is used to restore the data. That's all. Okay. So SP is adjusted after each push and pop. We know that. So if it is push, so stack pointer is first decremented by 4, and then the values are stored onto the stack memory. And if it is pop, first the contents are retrieved, and then the stack pointer is adjusted +4. Okay, it is always +4 or -4 because it is 32-bit operation that is taking place. So if it is pushed, it is always 32-bit data stored, and whenever it is paused, pop, it is 32-bit data retrieved. Okay. So you can see the example here. So what is happening here? So R0X, R1Y, R2Z. So that is in main program, R0 value is X. The register R0 is containing value X, R1 is containing value Y, and R2 is containing value Z. Okay. So and in the main program, you have the branch instruction. Branch BL means branch with link. So link register we already studied. So branch means link. What will happen is the link register will get the return address. Return address, that is the next location. So whatever the next location, after coming back from this function, okay, where the execution should start. So that is the next location here. So this address will be stored in the link register. Okay, that is what is BL, and then function. So you are calling a function here basically. Okay, so before you call the function, you have to first save the contents of R0, R1, and R2. Why? Because in function 1, you might again use the registers R0, R1, and R2. Okay, so if you use the same register without storing or without saving the registers, then these contents will be overwritten. So this X will be overwritten by some other value, Y will be overwritten by some other value, Z will be overwritten by some other value. Okay, so that is what will happen. So that is why before executing the function, or before executing a function call, before executing a interrupt service routine, the present context should be saved, because that is how you can come back once the completion of the subroutine is over. Once the subroutine is over, you have to come back. Once you come back, you should get all the previous intermediate results, because you have to continue from there. You should not restart from there. Okay, restarting is a separate aspect. You have to continue from there, because you should not lose the progress whatever you had done till that particular moment when the interrupt or the function call came. So you have to store this somewhere. You should not lose the progress. So that is how the progress is saved. So how the progress is saved? So you can see here, before executing function 1, so first you are saving the contents. Push R0, push R1, push R2. You are saving these 3 contents. After saving the contents only, then you are executing the function. So this, you can see these instructions execute the function. So even though you use again R0, R1 and R2 in this function now, it will not have any effect because already you have saved the contents. Okay. After completing the function, again you can see you are restoring the contents. Okay, you are restoring the contents in the reverse order. You can see it is reverse. So first it is pop R2. Okay. Next it is pop R1. Next it is pop R0. Because remember, stack is a last in first out memory. So whichever you have stored last, that will be available first. Okay. So last you have stored is R2. So that is why you have to first restore R2. Okay. Then R1, then R0. Reverse order. Okay. So whenever you return back to the main program, so R0 is again containing X, R1 is again containing Y, R2 is again containing Z. So the progress is restored. Okay, prior to the execution of the function, whatever the progress was there, same progress is restored back. That's all. Okay, same thing is explained here. Okay, so multiple registers are pushed simultaneously. So here you can see individual registers are pushed. Here multiple registers are pushed. Okay, that is also available. Okay. Yeah, so Cortex M3 stack implementation. See how the stack is stored. So suppose it is push R0. Okay, push R0. So what will happen here is here SP stack pointer, it will always point to the previously pushed data. You can see last pushed data. So whatever the last pushed data was there, that is where the stack pointer will be pointing. Okay. So now as soon as you do push R0, so what will happen? First thing is stack pointer should point to the free location, this location. Because if you don't address the stack, adjust the stack pointer, then what will happen is, since it is already pointing to the last push data, so this R0, push R0, so whatever this value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, again it will be stored in the same location. So what happens? The last push data will be lost. Okay, that should not happen. That is why whenever it is a push operation, first stack pointer is adjusted so that it will point to the free location. Okay, it should point to this location. So first SP is incremented by 4, it is plus 4. Okay, so then SP will point here, which is free. So this location is free. Now you can see in this location which is free, this data R0 data is stored. So R0 data is stored. So that the previous data is not overwritten. So the previous data is same. It is not changed. Same thing. Okay. So this is a stack grow. So you can see the arrow mark is downwards. It is downward or descending stack operation. So in pop, what will happen is, the reverse will happen. Pop R0 means, so SP is always pointing to the previously pushed data. So this previously pushed data will be stored to the destination, which is R0 here. After that, SP is incremented by 4. So whenever it is pushed, it is minus 4. Okay, because it is decrementing stack. Okay, push means SP minus 4 first and then store. And pop, whenever it is pop, first, since already SP is pointing to some data, it will be first retrieved to the destination. Here in this case, it is R0 because it is pop R0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it is stored to R0 first. And then SP is adjusted to the next location, this location, by doing it plus 4. By doing plus 4. Okay, so that is what. So why it is plus 4? Because here each push and pop operation transfers 4 bytes of data. Okay, so that is why it is SPC incremented or decremented by 4. Okay, because in one location it can store only 8 bits. Memory can store 8 bits. So since it is 32 bits data, 4 locations are required. So it is plus or minus 4. So 2 stack model. So we already know that this stack model can be controlled using control register. And in that control register, it is control register bit 1. Okay. So if control register bit 1 is 0, main stack is used. Okay. And if this control register bit 1 is 1, so then process stack is used in thread mode. Okay. This is the basic arrangement. So if control register bit 1 is 0, main stack is used for both thread mode and handler mode. Okay, and if this bit is 1, so process stack pointer PSP will be used in thread mode. So one thing you have to remember, in handler mode, it is always main stack. Handler mode always uses main stack. So only thing you can choose is whether thread mode uses main stack or not. So how that can be chosen? Using control register bit 1. Okay. Same thing is explained here. So you can see here, in thread mode also MSP is used. In handler mode also MSP is used. Why? Because control register bit 1 is 0. That is why. Okay. In next arrangement, you can see control register bit 1. Control register bit 1 is 1. In this case, what will happen is, so in thread mode, it will use PSP, and in handler mode, it will use MSP. As I told, if it is handler mode, always it is MSP only. You can see in this diagram as well as this diagram. Handler mode means it is always MSP. Only thing is you can choose which stack it will use in the process, that is user mode. Okay, that's all. So again, how to access the stack pointer using the special instructions MRS and MSR. One is for reading the stack pointer and one more is writing to the stack pointer. Okay. So next thing is reset sequence. So what will happen whenever you press the reset button of the Cortex M3? Okay. So there are two things that will happen. So whenever you press the reset button of Cortex M3, two things will happen. First thing is it will read 2 words from the memory. So after you press the reset button, okay, it will read 2 words from the memory. What is that? First word is, first address that the processor will read is 8 zeros. Okay, 8 zeros. So what is there in 8 zeros actually? If you see this diagram, okay, in 8 zeros, in this location, it will have the stack pointer, initial stack pointer value. So you can see 2000 8000. What is this? It is the initial value of the stack pointer. That is, you have to initialize stack pointer. Why? Because soon after reset, you may use push and pop instructions. Okay. So to use push and pop instruction, you need SP, stack pointer. So if you don't initialize SP, you cannot use push and pop. So that is why to initialize SP, that initial address of the stack pointer is available in this location 00000001. Okay. So this is the initial value the processor will read, so that the stack pointer is initialized. You can see stack pointer is initialized. So this is where stack pointer is pointing, this location 20008000. So you have initialized the stack. So after that, you can go on using push and pop instruction. You can see after that, if you use the push operation, so first stacked item will be stored here. If you use another push, second stacked item will be available here. So it is downward stack. Okay. The next address the processor will read after reset sequence is 00000000. Why it will read this location? If you remember, it will read this location 00000004 because the ISR for reset sequence, the ISR for reset sequence is located in which location? 4 location, in location 4. Why? Because we calculated that. So reset sequence, reset is type 1 interrupt. Okay, it is type 1 interrupt multiplied by 4. So what is the value you will get? It is 0004. So this is where the ISR for reset will be present. So that is why it will read this location. 4 zeros followed by 3 zeros, 4. Okay. So you can see in this diagram. So as soon as it reads this location, it will get the ISR starting address for reset sequence. Okay, so which is the starting address? In this case, it is 101. So immediately it will jump to that address and it will start executing. Okay, so you can see here the address actually is 101, but it is actually jumping to 100. Okay, Address is 101, it is jumping to 100. Why, we shall see. Okay, so it will indicate this. So reset vector, starting address. So the LSB should always be set to 1 to indicate thumb state. So that is why the address is, what is the address? 1001. So LSB is set to 1, indicating that it is thumb state. Okay. So processor will come to know that. So that last one is because of thumb state. It will remove that last one and it will correct it to 100. So that last one is removed because processor knows that that last one is because of thumb state. It indicating thumb state. So it will remove that one and it will adjust the address and it will jump accordingly. So it will jump to this location. Okay. So this is what is there in this reset sequence. Okay, so same thing is explained. So just go through. So again, it's a question for 5 marks. Explain the reset sequence for Cortex M3. So you have to write these two diagrams. So this is the first diagram and this is the second diagram. So after reset, so the processor will read this location, 8 zeros. What will be there in the 8 zeros? Initial value of tag pointer. Okay. After this, it will go to this location. Why? Because reset is of exception type 1, and for exception type 1, the ISR for exception type 1, the address will be in this location using the formula 1 into 4. So you will get 4. Okay, so it is exception type multiplied by 4. Okay.